Hello everybody, welcome to Talking Tech from Consumer Reports. Today we're going to be talking about the Comcast-Time Warner cable merger and Netflix. What happens when Netflix starts making deals with the cable company that delivers you your internet. Hi, I'm Glenn Doreen. Don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes or YouTube, where you can see all the episodes of Talking Tech, or obviously come to consumerreports.org, where you can see all of our video content. And reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter. We want to hear your questions and suggest things for us to discuss. Maybe we'll talk about you. In the meantime, let's talk about Comcast and Time Warner. Let's start with them. I'm here with Jim Wilcox. He is our televisions expert, and actually your televisions audio. You're one of our experts, Renaissance experts, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But here we're talking about cable, the company that's delivering the content that ends up on your TV, on your computer, etc. Why don't you walk us through what this merger means? What are these two companies? Why are they merging?
Yeah, I think that there's just a lot of pressure right now for companies to continue to get bigger in its environment regulatorily, where it seems like that's an okay thing. There's the expectation that this merger will probably go through. But I think, it's not operating in a vacuum right now, so you have a lot of different things that are causing consumer concern. So you have, the net neutrality rule, which we'll talk about a little bit later, happening. You have Netflix deciding to pay Comcast for better access to its servers. And so I think a lot of people just find that this environment right now is a little bit anti-consumer.
Yeah, it certainly does seem that way. In fact, it's worth noting, we have an advocacy wing. Consumer Reports has an advocacy wing that has totally come out against this Comcast-Time Warner merger. They think it poses a danger, well, not a danger, but a threat to consumers, and is going to end up with everything from higher prices to less competition. And I don't know. How do you feel about that? What do you think? How do you think it's going to pan out for consumers?
I think that the fear is that as companies get bigger, they just wield so much power in negotiating. One of the unusual things about Comcast is that they're a TV service provider, but they also own NBC Universal, so they're also a content provider. And so there's
in fact, they had to sign an agreement with the FCC when they made that merger, right?
Right. So
which should keep them from doing some of the from violating some of the basic net neutrality principles.
Right.
And in fact, God, there's so much to unpack here, right? Before this there was the Verizon FCC ruling, and not to get too wonky about it, but essentially it sort of defanged the FCC and their ability to police the delivery of the internet. Right. So, and these companies, they deliver internet, television, telephone, and all those things are sort of stepping on one another now, aren't they?
And I think that was one of the problems, is that initially these were looked at as TV service providers, and in fact they're also the broadband providers now. So I think what happens, with this merger, you're going to have one company that's serving about 30% of all of the paid TV customers in the country. So that gives them a lot of power in terms of when they're negotiating. Now, we all have seen, in the deals that they're negotiating with the content providers, it gives them a lot of leverage. And so one thing is, you would think that, well, maybe that'll mean that their rates could be cheaper for their customers. But one thing to think about is 70% of the people are not Comcast Time Warner, and they think that the fear is that the cost for those guys who don't have that same negotiating power is that 70% of the customers may be paying more just as a result of Time Warner Comcast coming together.
Yeah. So let's talk for a second about those deals, right? So a lot of people have been seeing their cable bills rise and rise and rise, and the cable companies have been saying, listen, we have to pay more for the content. We have to, ESPN wants a lot of money. They want subscriber fees of, I think it's like $5 a subscriber now, whether or not you like sports. And they say, hey, we're just passing the cost on to you. And what I understand is the position of the big cable companies is, hey, we get bigger, we have more negotiating power, more leverage, we can negotiate a better deal. Price gets delivered to you. But as you say, what if you're not the customer of the biggest company in the world?
And two things. One, you wonder, with this merger, is it going to cause the other cable companies to say, we better start merging, and in fact you have increased consolidation? The other thing I worry about is, cable companies do miserably in our customer service surveys every year.
They sure
and
do.
so now you got to merge two completely separate databases into one. So if you're a Time Warner customer, if you get merged into the Comcast database, we wonder is the customer service level going to get worse as the company gets bigger?
Yeah. In other words, do they then look for efficiencies, and then do those efficiencies go and hit the consumer when they need to call up because their cable's out?
Right. So instead of be there from 8 till 4, it's from 8 until 8 or
8
something.
until 8 at night. Yeah. So what about their argument that they don't compete in any markets, right? So one of the and from our research, they really don't. And in fact, they're even divesting themselves of a bunch of subscribers, a bunch of consumers. Although it's going to be interesting, where are those people going to get tossed to? But they're saying, hey, it's not as if we reduced the level of choice for any one individual. So let's look at that. Are they right? I mean, is it that, hey, if you were a Time Warner, you never had a choice between Time Warner and Comcast before, so why does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're right in that regard, but I think that they're ignoring some of the bigger issues that we've been talking about, is that you're creating a bigger entity, and bigger entities have more negotiating power in different ways. Cable has really never really competed very strongly with each other in those markets, so I don't see that changing. But I do see the competitive landscape changing in terms of being able to negotiate better deals. Some of the other things that we will talk about that have happened, allowing them to favor their own content over other other competitive content and things like that, and just the potential ability to stifle innovation by smaller companies that can't compete on the same level.
Yeah, I was going to get into that. What about their investment in technology and infrastructure? Right, like as you get bigger, presumably you have more resources to throw at that, but maybe you don't have as much incentive to do so anymore, right? Because you sort of reduced the overall competitive landscape. If nobody else is upping their broadband to 100 megabits per second, why bother, right? If there's only 3 or 4 players in town, maybe nobody's really pushing each other.
There's two ways to look at it too, because where I'm coming from in some ways is like, well, maybe this provides a little bit more incentive. When you get that big and you have that many customers, Comcast has rolled out for a cable company, a pretty innovative, X1 system. It's a whole home DVR system. Right? It's their set-top box. More advanced than Time Warner. So if you're a Time Warner customer, you may be like, oh, maybe I'm going to get some better hardware.
They'll finally get rid of that scientific Atlanta box.
And the other thing is, I'm curious as to whether or not, cable's rolled out this thing called DOCSIS 3.0. It's given them about 300 megabits per second speed.
Unpack the jargon.
So it's just your internet speed. Most people are probably getting 15 megabits per second. So this new system that they have enables them to up the bandwidth.
Yeah, and have just a higher ceiling, right?
And so the higher ceiling is around 300. But when you look at what Google's doing,
Google Fiber. Yeah.
Google Fiber is, the capacity is multiples of that, and I'm wondering whether cable companies are looking at that and wondering if they need to be competitive with what Google's doing. And certainly the size increase, the size increase of a company will give them both the wherewithal and the incentive to look at the next competitor, because I don't think really, cable doesn't have that much competition unless you're willing to go to one of the telcos or to a satellite service.
So what about the content providers? When a lot of people say streaming video, what they really mean is Netflix, and there's been some news around them recently we alluded to before. Tell us what the structure of that is.
Yeah, I mean, basically what happened was, the way that Netflix operates, there's a whole back end to their business, and a lot of times what they do is, they have handoffs to these third parties who carry they store and carry their content
over
to the ISP.
Over the backbone of the
internet,
and
right? It's invisible to consumers, but what happens sometimes is that there's congestion on these third-party distributors. And so the deal that Netflix just announced was that they are actually now going to pay Comcast. Pretty much, if you think of it as like an exit ramp to a highway, they're getting their own exit ramp so that they're going to be able to bypass these third-party people where congestion supposedly occurs.
And that means that they pay up front to guarantee like a quality of service essentially to the end user, right?
And so that's the good thing, is if you're a Netflix customer in Comcast market, you're supposed to get better quality of service. So it means you get a higher quality video, it doesn't pixelate, doesn't lag, there's not as much buffering and all that. The fear though is that that these sorts of deals are great for companies that have the financial wherewithal to pay. And this is a new thing that's happening where you're now paying for that access.
So does that unpack net neutrality? I mean, I think a lot of people are wondering, like, is that, and to, I guess, to explain to anybody who doesn't understand this vague concept of net neutrality, it's essentially, do ISPs, do internet service providers get to discriminate between content, charge more for it, slow some things down, or must they treat all internet content equally? So how does this factor into that? Is this net neutrality or not?
It's more complicated than yes or no, unfortunately, because what's happening is they're saying we're just providing a direct access. We are not changing the prioritization, and that's what really net neutrality is about, is prioritizing one type of content over another. And so, you know, I'm sure legal minds are going to be looking at this, people far smarter than me. But I think that that's sort of the sticking point, is that, you know, hey, we're not prioritizing content, we're just giving you your own little pathway so that you don't have to deal with some of the other congestion.
It's interesting, it's kind of like the Amazon strategy of like actually getting you real stuff, right? In other words, Amazon puts little fulfillment centers all around the country, and then if you order something from Amazon and it just happens to be at the fulfillment center near you, ta-da, it's there. It's there within a day or 2 days, and it was easy for them. So it's kind of what they're doing with video. Is that right? And
some of these deals have happened before, but I think that the fact that they're paying now, because there's always been that sort of handshake agreement where, you know, we'll let your stuff go through our pipes, and you know, just and vice versa. But here, and I think that again, the concern is that it's going to make the playing field unlevel for smaller companies. So if you're, you know, one of these
mom and pop's video streaming, you're gonna.
And so, you know, when that happens, there's a fear that innovation is going to be curtailed as well, because, you know, if you have to start paying this extra cost, you already, you know, Netflix is already paying an ever-escalating content cost, and now you're adding on, you know, broadband costs to the service.
Yeah,
it makes it harder for for new companies to come in and to compete.
Yeah, so Netflix has the capital to do this stuff. They're investing in content. They're throwing money around like crazy right now. At what point does this start hitting the consumer in the pocketbook? I mean, we're all used to this $8 a month streaming fee. Does this eventually find its way into a more expensive service?
You know, I think it's going to be hard to figure out, you know, what if costs go up, what they're due to, because one, we do have escalating content costs. We know that programming gets more expensive every year. And so it's going to be hard, you know, to figure out whether this incremental cost, and that's what Netflix called it. Netflix wasn't complaining about this. You know, they had this other initiative where they were trying to convince companies to do this voluntarily. That didn't work out. So now they're paying. They said it's an incremental cost to them. But,
so
you know,
they can absorb that now, but what happens when they have to start making deals with every cable company out there? And at a certain point, does it translate to higher costs of delivery? And then, isn't that what we were worried about with net neutrality in the first place?
Right. And, you know, so, you know, part of it's a market question. What are people willing to pay? So they're willing to pay $8 a month right now. Would they be willing to pay $10 a month? You know, Amazon is going to go through the same thing. You know, content costs are saying, you know, they're talking about, you know, maybe a $20 bump in their Amazon Prime fee where you get the free videos for, you know, 2-day shipping. So I think that all of these providers are dealing with that, especially subscription services.
Do you see a potential for tiered services? Like if you wanted at this speed, you get the, I mean, I guess all that's on the table, right?
And that's the other fear, is that, you know, there are going to be tiered services, and based on your ability to pay. I mean, it exists to a certain degree now, but they think that that's going to be exacerbated, where, you know, poors get worse service, people who have more money to spend on it are going to get better service.
Yeah, well, so, and then therein lies the ultimate potential problem with net neutrality unraveling. Well, obviously, this is going to continue, and we already know that there are potentially other deals on the table for Netflix. There's been, what is it, Verizon has, Verizon, in fact, the very company they seemed to be arguing with a couple of weeks ago with, you know, strangling their bandwidth. Seems like they're negotiating with them too. And this is going to develop, so we'll be following it. And we hope you're there. So please join us the next time on Talking Tech. Please follow us on iTunes and on YouTube, and of course on consumerreports.org. We have lots more videos for you to look at. And we also want to hear your questions. Please reach out to us on Twitter, reach out to us on Facebook, send us your questions, send us your suggestions for topics. Maybe the next time you see us, we'll be talking about you.